Evaluating a function from a graph. Recall that the way we use the function language is that we start with the function name, it's followed by the input in parentheses, and the result is the output. So in the default case of our input variable being x and our output variable being y, that looks like f of x equals y. Also remember that that is read f of x. That is the function f applied to the input x. So when we look at something like this, first one, f of 1, what we're being told, because 1 is in the position of the x, that 1 is my input variable or my value of x. And the result, what I'm going to want over here on the right-hand side as my answer, is going to be a value of y. So we're going to look for a point on our graph that has x coordinate 1. And it looks like we can find one right here. This has x coordinate 1 and y coordinate 4, which tells us that f of 1 is equal to 4. So all we're doing when we're evaluating a function from a graph is looking for a point on the graph that has a particular coordinate. In this case, for f of 1 and the next one, f of 2, we are given the x coordinate and we're looking for the y coordinate. So again, this tells us that x is negative 2, and we're looking for a y coordinate that corresponds to x equals negative 2. I find the point negative 2, negative 3. So f of negative 2 is equal to negative 3. Going on to the next problem, we're asked for what value or values of x is f of x equal to 0. Now this 0 is in the position of the y in our f of x equals y. So this means that we're being told a value of y, and we're asked to find x. So now we want to find points on this graph that have y coordinate 0. That would be points that lie on the x-axis. Looks like there's one here, 2, 0. And another one over here at negative 1, 0. And so my two values, which I can write in roster notation, would be negative 1 and 2. There are a few different reasonable ways to write this. We could just say x equals negative 1 and x equals 2. That would be also an acceptable form for our answer. We want to make sure that we don't put parentheses or brackets around these two numbers though, because that would give it a very different meaning. Parentheses could mean an ordered pair, negative 1, 2, but these are both values of x. These are not a value for x and a value for y. Or it could even mean the interval from negative 1 to 2, which is an infinite set, and that's definitely not what we want to indicate here. So, roster notation, or just simply listing the values in a way that's clear. Going on to this next example, it's going to be the same concept, but it'll feel a little bit different because this time we have a continuous graph with an infinite number of points instead of a finite discrete graph like we had previously. There were only 5 points on our last graph. This one has an infinite number of points, but we still interpret it the same way. This is still negative 1 as a value of x, so we're going to look for a point on this graph with x coordinate negative 1. To find that, it's best to just start at negative 1 on the x-axis and then trace vertically to the graph to find the y coordinate of that point. And it looks like f of negative 1 here is equal to 2. We can do the same thing for f of negative 3. Finding negative 3 on the x-axis and tracing vertically to the graph to find a point, and then reading off the y coordinate of that point would be negative 4. So the mechanics of evaluating it feel a little bit different because we have more points to consider, but it is still the same concept. Finally, for what value or values of x is f of x equal to 2? Again, this is giving us a value of y. So this time I'm going to start at 2 on the y-axis and trace horizontally to the graph and give the x values that give me a y coordinate of 2. It looks like we have 2 of them. We have the first point that we already found previously. So that's going to be x equals -1, and then we have another one over here to the right that's going to give us x equals 3. I'll choose to use roster notation just like I used on the last example.